Okay. Hello, everyone, and a real honour to be here talking to you today. I want to start by really thanking the whole team at WDC. It's been such a fantastic event here. I was part of the selection committee in 2019, so I got this incredible view of Valencia, and I think we made the right decision by giving the World Design Capital designation to this beautiful city. So for me, talking about raising design awareness, it's something I've been doing for the last 25, 26 years of my life in running Good Design Australia and our National Good Design Awards program. And this idea of shifting from product design, industrial design to policy design, if you asked me 26 years ago about the idea of policy design, it's something I've never even heard of. So, as it's been said before, the industry has changed significantly. But as someone who is in this business of promoting design, I love this quote from Sarah Weir, who is the former CEO of the Design Council in the UK, in that the problem with design is that it's everywhere. And because it's everywhere, it's also nowhere. And I think that really just sums it up. With design being everywhere, people just don't take any notice of it. And to raise awareness, who are we raising awareness for? The general public, the people who use and consume design. And I think the biggest problem we have, or the biggest challenge we have, is that people only notice design when it's bad. They don't necessarily notice design when it's good. And I remember having this conversation with Sarah, and I thought that was a very interesting insight, that a big challenge we have in this idea of promoting design is that we actually sometimes have to talk about bad design as well. So if I rewind back to the early part of 2020, if you remember, in Australia, it was the middle of our summer. We had these terrible bushfires, and picture up there in the top right is a little girl on the back of a boat wearing a mask. This is well before COVID, wearing a mask to protect herself from all the smoke of this incredible fire that we had. I was in Sydney at the time, and there was this blanket of smoke over the entire city, and my kids were terrified, everyone was terrified about where this was all going to go. And then a couple of months later, we were wearing masks for a completely different reason, because of COVID. And the government, parts of government in Australia were still arguing about climate change, whether these bushfires were being caused by severe heat and climate change. And the other side of government saying, obviously, it's got something to do with climate change. The government was also talking quite a lot about how to reboot Australia's manufacturing capability. We ran out of masks, protective gear, our supply chains broke down. We quickly became aware of the fact that we weren't very good at manufacturing things in Australia. We were very dependent on many of these products from overseas countries. So we went about and we re-established the Australian Design Council. This was actually a council that was established way back in 1958 by the federal government. And over that 60-year period, it actually got dissolved, it got handballed across to many different organisations, and we thought now is as good a time as any to start injecting design into this conversation that our government is having. So rather than creating a council filled with designers, which is what you would normally do, we did the complete opposite. We went out to the biggest, the most prominent and most respected business leaders in the country. You may not know some of these people, but the lady in the top right corner over there is Catherine Livingstone. She's the chairman of the Commonwealth Bank. It's the biggest bank in Australia. The gentleman below her, Andrew Liveris, is the former chairman of Dow Chemical in the US. He was an advisor to President Obama on manufacturing. He's now the chairman of the Brisbane 2032 Olympic Games Committee. The gentleman in the middle is a former CEO of Deloitte, and the list goes on. This gentleman down here, CEO of Telstra, which is our biggest telecommunications provider. And we were very deliberate in creating a council filled with business people that understood design versus creating a council filled with designers. And I'll tell you a bit more about why we did that. And this was all through COVID. It was all through Zoom, so they were a lot more accessible. We didn't have to organise meetings. We ended up talking to them one by one through Zoom and trying to explain to them what it is that we were wanting to do, which is to inject design into government policy. How were we going to do that? The message that we got back from all of them was, don't use design to create strategy. Use design to embed, you challenge existing strategies and embed design into them. So what that means is there's a lot of the heavy lifting, a lot of the work in all these strategies has already been done. But design actually wasn't part of these existing strategies, particularly within government. So we launched the council. We got a lot of media within the business press, talking about the business side of design, talking about the economic impact of what design can do. And I'll just skip forward here. We created a framework, and this framework we call the National Design Challenge Framework. And it was with this broad idea of how do we actually embed design into existing strategies at a sector level across Australia's economy. So really, really big, ambitious target of trying to figure out, firstly, how do we do that? And with this council behind us that actually had the ear of government. So I wasn't knocking on the door of government, they did that for us. And that was a real breakthrough as well. Identifying what sectors across the Australian economy we should be focusing on. As we dug deeper, we understood that the government actually had a very comprehensive plan in rebooting Australia's economy. They focused on 6 priority areas, everything from minerals and resources, so Australia's a very mineral-rich country, that's no surprise, food and agriculture, health and medical products, recycling and clean energy, defence, and then space industries. So these were 6 areas that the Australian government understood that Australia had comparative advantage. And we wanted to basically present the idea to them that if design was injected across all these different sectors, we would have a competitive advantage. We'd actually be the best in the world at it. And this is how we went about doing it. So there we go. So this is, I guess, a high-level, simplistic view of what the framework is. We started with the SDGs. We looked at these national government priority roadmaps, which already existed. So these were strategies, these were policies. And we focused on one of those areas, which is the food and agriculture sector. We created co-design teams. So these were upwards of 30 teams of designers, industrial designers, digital designers, communication designers, design strategists. And we looked very closely at the existing strategies in that sector. And lo and behold, when you open up a PDF document and it's got 300 pages of strategy in it, and you can very quickly do a search for the word design. It may have appeared 4 or 5 times, but it was absolutely evident to us that design was not part of these strategies. So we worked with our co-design teams and interrogated these strategies, pulled them apart, and essentially the end product was a revised strategy where design was baked into it right from the very, very start. So we created this clicker's not working too well. Next one, here we go. We focused first on the food and agriculture sector in Australia. And one of the questions was, this was a $59 billion industry to Australia. And their challenge and their strategy was how do they actually grow that from $59 billion to $200 billion by 2030. But the through design bit was missing. We focused on an area in Australia called the Bega Valley. So this is a horrible picture of Bega Valley. It's one of the biggest farming communities in the south coast of Australia. And it was completely decimated by the bushfires. after the bushfires, the local community got together, so all the farmers and the producers, and said, how do we make sure that we work together to prevent something like this ever happening again? And they developed, through a lot of extensive work, a strategy to actually transform the entire Bega Valley into a circular economy. Again, we approached them and we said, look, can we actually pilot this National Design Challenge framework and interrogate your strategy to see where design can actually add greater value? We did a similar thing. We looked at their existing strategy. Design was nowhere to be found in it. There were a few words, few mentions of the word design here and there. We spent 8 weeks with a group of designers to go through this strategy, and at the end, we came up with a completely revised strategy. And I think the interesting thing from my perspective is that the chair of Bega Valley basically said to us he was expecting a result, he was expecting an outcome. What he was surprised was that the outcome was a completely different strategy. It helped him reframe what it was that they were trying to do. It helped him actually pull the handbrake up and stop particular projects as well. So the end result of that was, as I said, a completely different strategy. They've now created a design advisory board for Bega Valley, which is a really, really big outcome for us. That's going to hold them accountable to make sure that there's a design governance framework around how they implement this Bega Valley strategy as well. Right through to every single project, every single touch point, there'll be a design review program that will attach to that. So what we're now trying to do is to say, right, we've got this framework, we've developed what we think is a pretty good pilot, and we're now going to see how we can roll this out across all those different sectors across Australia's economy. It's a big, ambitious goal. We're still struggling to get the ear of government to understand exactly what this is, but I think we've got some evidence there to show that it worked. And our big ambition is to actually position Australia as a design-led economy through this approach and make sure that the government can actually come to us as this body when it comes to design and look at all their different programs and different strategies and different policies and say, can you actually run your design review over that? So in a nutshell, that's what I guess we're trying to do in Australia through raising the awareness of design. But I wanted to leave you with this little quote, which I'm sure you've seen lots of these pop through during the pandemic. For me, it really resonated with me because we talk about climate change and we talk about all these emissions and talk about how we can actually slow things down. But to me, I think that the worst thing that can come out of this whole virus is that we come out of it unchanged. And I want to leave you with another quote, which I love as well, is that good design solves problems, but really, really great design prevents them from ever happening in the first place. And as someone who's passionately trying to promote the value of design, I think that's a really, really important quote as well. We've got some very, very complex challenges to address in the world, and we've heard that said, I think, again and again and again during this conference. And if we can position design as that problem-solving tool, that's where we're going to get the greatest impact. So I thank you very much for your attention, and it's been a pleasure to talk to you.